It's going to happen soon. Just so much anxiety.
Good afternoon. You usually do something first, right? Okay, good. I was like, where is she?
I'm back here today. Hello and welcome to Opportunity Home San Antonio's Finance Committee meeting. Today we are meeting out of Springview Apartments. I will begin by conducting our roll call. Chair Gabriel Lopez.
Here.
Vice Chair Gilbert Casillas.
Here.
Commissioner Barbara Ankama Burford.
Here.
Committee Chair Dalia Contreras.
Here.
Commissioner Estrella Garcia Diaz.
Here.
Commissioner Janet Garcia. Commissioner Leila Powell.
Here.
Please note that this meeting will be recorded in its entirety. You may now begin the meeting.
Great. Do we need to do the other pieces on here? Legal, counsel, roll call, interpreter, announcements? Just want to make sure.
No.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay. The Board of Commissioners or its committee may hold a closed meeting pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071-076 for consultation concerning attorney-client matters, real estate litigation, personnel, and security matters. The board or committee reserve the right to enter into closed meeting at any time during the course of this meeting. Are there any citizens to be heard?
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
Thank you. We're going to move on to today's discussion items. Item number 3, update and discussion regarding the quarterly financial report. Aaron Sladek, did I say that correctly? Sladek, thank you. Director of Finance and Accounting.
Afternoon. Just want to say I appreciate the new setting. I hope we can do this in the future. I haven't had a chance to be out on a property, so it's really cool to do something like this. So I'm pleased to present the quarterly financial report for Opportunity Home San Antonio for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. The financial performance of our organization this year shows a mixed but overall positive picture. We'll continue splitting the income statement as we have in the past between the operations and capital segments. Operations, I'll remind you, covers our core housing programs of public housing, Section 8 and Beacon, our management company, the Central Office Call Center, which is over our federal programs, and our resident services or resident engagement, which you won't see anymore because we've old named the Community Development Initiatives. So you'll see that on future reporting. So the operations segment ended the year with a deficit for non-cash items of $2.2 million. This was $3.5 million worse than the budgeted amount. However, this deficit would have been larger if not for the significant support provided by MTW Fund. As follows: $19.7 million was dedicated to public housing operating and capital expenditures. $7.8 million was used to pay off Beacon debt. $1.8 million covered operating costs for the Beacon portfolio, and $1.7 million went towards resident engagement. The remaining HUD-held MTW funds were used to of the 100 labor and Snowden projects. Operating revenue for the operations segment fell short of the budget by $10.8 million. This was largely due to tenant revenue, which was $9.9 million under budget due to lower occupancy rates, especially in key Beacon properties such as Wood Hill, Cottage Creek, Rosemont at Highland Park, and Costa Valencia. The occupancy for these properties was between 67% and 80%, while the average occupancy for the overall Beacon portfolio was around 83%. We started a new indicator we're calling economic occupancy. I'm not sure if Diana introduced this previously, but the basic formula is actual tenant revenue, net of adjustments, and we're dividing that by budgeted tenant revenue. That's at 74% at the end of June. So we look forward to seeing how that tracks in future quarters. And that's really just considered a more useful indicator than your physical occupancy, because this is actually going to show it's a metric of how much revenue each property is actually generating. So the portfolio, again, was at 74% for the fiscal year. Moving on to grant revenue. This category exceeded the budget by 1.8 million, mainly due to higher Section 8 administrative fees and project-based HAP subsidies. However, Section 8 HAP revenue faced an unfavorable variance of 3.4 million due to lower voucher utilization, which was offset by a corresponding variance in HAP expenses of 3.3 million. Moving on to operating expenses, we exceeded the budget by 9 million, primarily due to increased costs for maintenance and repairs, as well as higher expenses for protective services at public housing and Beacon properties. Savings in other areas such as technology and consulting fees partially mitigated this overrun. I'm now going to move on to the capital segment. So this covers our capital fund and real estate services lines of business. This segment achieved a surplus before non-cash items of 22.1 million, which exceeded the budget by 2.7 million. In revenue, we saw a surplus of approximately 7.7 million. This was driven by 10.3 million in miscellaneous revenue, including proceeds from the sale of the Claiborne Commons leasehold, interest and development fees. I just want to remind the board that development fees, although we do recognize those as revenue, as the projects are constructed, we do not receive that cash. There is usually a piece that's received up front, and then if the project is within budget, usually the equity investor will pay out installments towards the development fee, and then there's almost always a deferred amount that's paid from cash flow, and that can take anywhere from 10 to 15 years. So we usually, all these properties are pro forma to actually pay that fee off within 15 years, but we have not always seen that as the case, depending on how they're operating. And then operating expenses in the capital segment were 4.5 million over budget. Most of this was the result of last quarter activity. There were some Victoria Commons activities recorded related to the redevelopment that Catalyst is leading. But these costs were partially offset because we sold 41 vacant lots. So the sale of those lots pretty much covered the expenses related to that. Moving on to the balance sheet now, which is combined for both operations and capital. Total assets and deferred outflows of resources decreased slightly by 0.8 million. Current assets dropped due to a decrease in cash and HUD receivables, while fixed assets increased due to significant investments in property improvements, as well as acquisition of Midcrown. Total liabilities and deferred inflows of resources saw a decrease of 12.8 million, largely due to the payoff of the Sendero bonds in December and a reduction in accounts payable. And finally, leased assets, which is a component of the deferred inflows of resources, rose by 4.7 million due to execution of new ground leases for the B-State Reed and Fiesta Trails limited partnerships. And we did see an increase in the organization's net position of 12 million for the fiscal year, indicating strong financial health. So in summary, while our operations segment faced revenue shortfalls and expense overruns, the capital segment showed strong performance with significant revenue gains and a positive surplus. The organization's net position has improved, indicating a solid financial foundation despite operational challenges in public housing in Beacon. Can we please move to the slides? So this first chart here is a comparison year to year. It shows actual and budget for both 6/30/24 and 6/30/2023. Operating revenue was approximately 12% higher compared to the previous year. Looks like the only category here we saw a decrease in year over year was miscellaneous revenue. And that again was due to development fees. We recognized approximately 15 million last year versus 4.2 million this year. And partially offsetting that difference was that sale I mentioned previously of the Claiborne Commons leasehold interest. HAP revenue increased by 16.7 million year over year due to increases in payment standards and lease up. Grant revenue in red increased both due to the timing of capital grant expenditures, as well as a drawdown of additional 10% of CFP funds for 3 open CFP grants. So HUD allows us to draw an additional 10% for operations as needed, since we're considered a large PHA. And then tenant revenue in blue, that was 6.4 million higher year over year, and that was due to the acquisition of the Ravello and Midcrown properties. Next slide, please. So this is the consolidated operating expenses year-to-year comparison. We saw a 23% increase with all categories experiencing significant increases. HAP expense in orange, of course, is associated with the HAP revenue. So this was an increase of 19.2 million for the same reason. So an increase in payment standards and the lease up. Other expenses in green was 6.1 million higher. This was due to increases in protective services and additional fees and project costs associated with the Victoria Commons redevelopment. Utilities in yellow was up 1.2 million, primarily due to rate increases. Ordinary was up 7.1 million due to unit make-readies and beacon sectors. And fees and benefits in blue was 11.1 million higher due to the class and comp study and a rise in general staffing levels. Moving on to our charts here showing our financial ratios. This first one here is a debt to equity ratio. So of course that measures debt to equity. This we're seeing a decrease from last year of 0.44 to 0.39. This is a good thing. So the lower you go, the more a better debt to equity position you're in. It shows that it shows your investors and creditors that you have lower financial risk and that your debt is structured conservatively. Next slide, please. This one is the current ratio. So this is a measure of financial liquidity and how well the organization is able to meet its short-term liabilities. This current ratio increased from 2.17 last year to 3.35. So it's a very strong ratio. Next slide, please. And this covers the information I covered in my opening. It shows the MTW uses of funds. So you can see the public housing was the primary user there. If you total up all the public housing items there, it's approximately 19.7 million, I think it was. The only difference on this schedule versus what we've shown you in the past is we did add that second column for the capital fund program. That's also considered a use of MTW funds, but we wanted to show that here as well separately because we did draw that 6.2 million down to help support public housing operations for the year. And then included in your packets as well are a cash and investment summary and a grants report. I did want to talk about the cash report a little bit just because it was a significant decrease over the quarter of 19.2 million. The biggest piece of this was pre-funded HAP funding that was utilized. So basically in March, HUD pre-funded us 9.9 million. So there was a huge swing in that direction comparing end of March cash to December 31st cash for that quarter. And now this, after we used that cash in April to pay the landlord payments, that swing, of course, worked the other way. And then in addition to that, we made real estate loans of 3.5 million, 500,000 for Petrenko Commons and 3 million for the Josephine. And if you recall, we made those loans because the interest rates were very lucrative. I think they were 16 and 18%. We also funded a partnership deficit of around 1 million for Artisan at Salado. So we are no longer in that partnership. We disposed of it. We had to pay a little bit to get out of that one. It was not a property that Miranda felt we should retain in our portfolio and bring in-house. There was also a 0.7 million MTW finding difference. This was just a small timing difference and essentially related to we have a new analyst at HUD that's still trying to learn the ropes. So there's a bit of a delay in the from when we request the funds for HUD and when we actually receive them. So that money hit in July. And then the remaining balance associated with that decrease in cash was associated with vendor payments for related operations and capital projects for both public housing and Beacon. And then finally, do you all have this handout? Mine's on legal. Okay. So this is a published financial statement for July. So we wanted to share this format just because I think we're going to head in the direction of modifying our reporting. So right now we currently show, totals for capital, totals for operations, but this is going to actually present the financials by line of business, which we think is going to be more, illustrative. And I think it'll allow us to kind of hone in on the problem segments. As you know, like central office this year broke even, Section 8 broke even, but public housing and Beacon were really where we needed to focus on. So while we're still going to provide you a narrative report, I think we're going to change the format of the report and move in this direction. And then also, I wanted to mention, beginning in July, we actually did reclass the presentation for major repairs and upgrades. So those are going to be under, those were formerly under outside services here in operating expense. I think it's the fourth line down. But they are actually going to now be moved under replacement items, classified in the non-operating expense category. And that's because that's how the market treats these type of expenses. They're non-operating. So we want to align with the market with our reporting. And then just a note on the July financials, we are trending in a positive direction. But it's a little bit too early to say we're fully on the right path, because typically the expenses in the first month of the fiscal year are a little bit lower. But we are excited to see how they trend next month, and then of course in September we'll see how we're doing the first quarter. Now I'll take any questions or.
Are there any questions?
I always have questions, sorry.
Great.
First of all, I just really want to thank you for including the economic occupancy figure. That is so helpful in understanding the overall health of the portfolio, regardless of who's in a unit, but where the income that we're expecting. And so that's a very helpful number. And then I just wanted to clarify a couple of items that you had mentioned in the presentation. The first being that very big gap in tenant revenue being lower than what's projected for the year. I think that's primarily because multiple projects didn't come online when we anticipated them to come online.
Right.
No.
The biggest piece there would be 100 labor, which I think at year end was still maybe only 15% occupied.
So a combination of slow lease up and projects
Yeah.
being behind schedule.
Yes.
Okay. And then the improvement in the debt to equity ratio, did that also benefit from the sale of some of those portfolio properties that we had debt on that we know now no longer have debt in? Yeah.
So that debt would not have been on our books because those entities were non-consolidated.
Okay.
But we did pay off the Sendero debt in December, which is a little over 7 million. So that was the primary change there. I think there was also about a 6 million drop in accounts payable and accruals, and then another 3 million in which was a decrease in unearned revenue.
Okay.
Our auditors will come get me if I call it. Deferred is only supposed to be used for certain things now. So yeah, unearned revenue.
And then one last question. Can you tell me what constitutes bad debt net of collections on the combined income statement?
Bad debt net collection. So this is just going to be I think there's two accounts that actually play into this. I wish I had the full detail, but there's basically an account for the actual bad debt, which is like, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but it's like a 964.01. And then we also have a 964.02, which is the opposite side of that when we actually do make the collection. So those kind of net together and make up this total bad debt number. So sometimes you will actually see a positive number in here. So it looks a little strange, but that's what's going on there. If we've actually, like we've written off, but then we said, oh no, we are going to make some collections on this at this point.
That didn't resolve all of the cloudiness in my mind over
Okay.
this line item, but I will visit with somebody later. We don't have to go through it now.
Okay, I can get you that information.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Does anybody know what the occupancy of labor is today?
It's a little bit higher, but
over 50%.
it's over, okay. 52%
Thank you.
for Miranda.
This is just for a comment in the future and not necessarily directed to you, but more to you, Michael. Since you've taken over leadership, what I always think about the financial reports, it's the what. Plain and simple. It's the what has happened, what has transpired over time. How did we offset, costs when we were over budget, or what are we doing with under budget? But in terms of your own analysis on the financial health of the organization and what we want to do in response to some of the things that are driving, when we had our one-on-one, I understood the trade-offs that we're making, right? Like, yes, we're able to offset because we're using move to work dollars, which could also be used for something else if they weren't being used for that. And so I would love, at whatever time makes sense for you, for your own this is my analysis of the financial health of the organization, and the like, so what, now what? What are the things that we're going to want to shift? What are some of the more strategic steps that we can take as an organization to make sure that rather than this cycle that we've gotten into where we are able to cover with move to work dollars, we can say yes to other things that are part of the organization's goals.
Yes, absolutely, Commissioner. We're actually going to engage in a strategic planning process beginning later this year. And I think that process is going to lay out the framework and the blueprint on where we're going to be heading in the next fiscal year. So that will determine our financial numbers and provide kind of an initial analysis on what we expect in this coming up fiscal year and in the fiscal years after that.
That's great. And thank you all so much. This is very clear and helpful on all you're doing from a finance perspective to, make the bottom line positive for the organization. Any other questions before we move on to the next item? Okay, moving on to number 4, update and discussion regarding the quarterly internal audit report. Allison Schlegel.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Joanna told me how to move it, but I don't know. Sorry. Okay, so this is just going to be an overview of how we ended the fiscal year 23-24 and a little bit of 24-25. So the first slide, we have the internal audit activities that support the strategic outcomes. So ending internal audit reviewed 20 escrows over 5,000, and we approved a total of $245,873.43 for an average escrow of $12,293.67. July 1st, 24 through August 5th, we have received and reviewed and approved 16 escrows for over 5,000. 13 have been approved and 3 are awaiting correction. The next slide. So for 23-24 audit plan, we kicked off the audit of the human resources recruitment process. That audit was held on February 5th. The fieldwork has been completed. We reviewed the background checks, the marketing, interviewing, selection, documentation, and the processes and procedures through a 10% applicant sample size from January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2023. The draft report to date has been completed, and the exit conference for that was held on August 6th. The next slide, the control self-assessment for the asset management, financing, and refinancing of real estate assets. If you remember previously, I let you know that this was originally an audit for asset management. However, due to the changes in management in the asset management department, we deemed that it was going to be necessary to first conduct a controlled self-assessment. So that controlled self-assessment began on February 27th, and it's still ongoing. We will revisit an audit at a later date. For the audit of the safety and security triage high severity incidences, this is the same thing as the asset management one. This was an approved audit. However, in light of the recent activities that took place, the updates to the organization's approach and ensuring policies align with being a trauma-informed care organization, we recommended to conduct a controlled self-assessment prior to conducting the audit. This controlled self-assessment kicked off on March 18th. It's ongoing, and we will revisit an audit at a later date. So we also kicked off the audit of the Beacon Communities Affordable Program Regulatory and Fair Housing Compliance. This audit was held on April 4th. Fieldwork is underway, and we are currently sampling 10% of the move-ins for each program type under Beacon Communities from July 1st, 2023 through January 31st, 2024. For the 24-25 audit plan, we kicked off the audit of the resident services, grant compliance, and financial performance. That audit was, the kickoff actually was held on July 31st. I'm currently working on the field work. What we'll be reviewing here is to ensure that we are in compliance with HUD requirements, federal, state, and any relevant state, local government requirements. Grant funds are being utilized in accordance with the grant provisions. Grant funds are used for the intended purposes, and expenditures made with the grant funds are properly accounted for. So the sample size here will be determined based on the number of grants that were awarded, actively expended, and closed between July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. The next slide, we have the audit of the Beacon Communities repayment agreements. This audit was kicked off August the 5th. Here again, we will make sure we are in compliance with federal and state laws, any relevant state or local government requirements. Repayment agreement forms are completed accurately, and monthly repayment amounts do not exceed the 40% of the monthly adjusted income. Repayment requirements and processes were completed and adhered to, and repayment agreements, payments were collected and entered correctly and timely. So for this audit, we will sample 10% or a maximum of 10 files based on the number of repayment agreements executed and actively collected from July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. For 2023-2024, the three other programs that we review, the assisted housing program, we completed a total of 780 file reviews from July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. We completed 638 file reviews for 47 public housing and mixed income communities, and we reviewed 30 Beacon communities for 492 files and 11 partnership properties for 227 files. So for the corrective action items, we currently have 7 open corrective action items. 5 of them are pending the release of updated policies and procedures. One is for the public housing eligibility SOP. Actually, there's 2 for the same SOP. One is pending the completion of the creation of a repayment agreement for public housing, and then 2 are pending updated Section 3 program and procurement policies and procedures, and we're awaiting staff to be trained on those as well. One of them is pending the implementation of the new procurement process that is set to be completed December 31st, 2024, and then the last one is pending the review and updates of existing procurement processes. So that will also be completed by December 31st, 2024. We did have a third-party audit. It was the comprehensive compliance review from HUD. So HUD was on site from May 13th through the 17th, and they reviewed the governance, housing choice vouchers, Violence Against Women Act, public housing, Section 3, MTW, FSS, Ross, and PBB. The HUD staff assessed the PHA's program performance and compliance with HUD requirements and regulations by setting monitoring priorities on site and remote reviews. So out of this review, we did receive 5 recommendations, 4 best practices, 2 observations, and 1 finding. The recommendations were for the VAWA program, to make available the HUD forms 5380 and 5382, printed in the most 3 common languages for its respective geographic region. Public housing also had a recommendation, and that was to expand the newly implemented electronic inventory control program for equipment and similar assets to cover all assets and include the radio frequency identification tool and equipment tracking control. FSS received 3 recommendations. One was to ensure all individual training and service plans include a comprehensive goal obtained section, documenting clients' progress and achievements, and adding additional documentation supporting goals obtained in accordance with 24 CFR 984. Conduct a thorough review to ensure the 50058 forms are in chronological order and completed to adequately capture income data that will be counted with escrows. And finally, to add a checklist to capture and track essential elements and case notes for client meetings that must be included in every applicant file. For best practices, the governance team, HUD said that they were impressed with Opportunities Homes processes to perform background checks. Numerous files were reviewed and found to be detailed and comprehensive with complete and easy to discern information. All files reviewed were complete and vetted background checks, and all PPI was properly labeled as confidential in accordance with 24 CFR 960.204A4 and 24 CFR 5.903B. The HCV program also received a best practices for technology to streamline administrative processes such as application processes, payments, communications, resident exams, complaints, and inspections. And the MTW program received 2 best practices. One for they built a mapping system in Yardi to quickly identify and flag when there are changes to local non-traditional unit eligibility in accordance with PIH 2011-45. And Opportunity Homes Administrative Plan was well organized in accordance with the requirements set forth in 24 CFR 982.54. We received 2 observations, both for HCV. When HUD staff visited the HCV waiting room and conducted numerous interviews, tenants complained about not receiving callbacks for 2 weeks. HUD recommended that Opportunity Home improve or create a strategy to track, log, and return calls in a timely manner. And the HCV entrance did not have any handouts in languages other than English. So HUD recommends that we make those handouts available in other languages as well. And then the finding we had was for public housing. It was for noncompliance with, was revealed with respect to non-rent collections and violations of established eviction policies dictated by both 24 CFR 966 and PIH Notice 2023-27. This was a low-risk finding, as Opportunity Home has already addressed the noncompliance, and HUD is also monitoring the finding for the closeout. And then finally, we had the Emergency Housing Voucher Program Financial Review and Program. So the Quality Assurance Division of HUD kicked this audit off on June 4th. They concluded the audit on June 7th, and we are currently awaiting the final report from HUD on that one. Any questions?
Yes. Number one, when you audit the files, are they done randomly? They're picked randomly?
Yes, sir.
They're not told in advance which ones? Okay, so
No, sir.
make sure. Okay. What is RFI?
The
Radio
RFI?
frequency?
Request for information.
No, it says.
No, but what, it says radio.
RFI. It's radio frequency for the.
What is it?
It's the,
Tool and equipment tracking.
It's for equipment tracking? Okay. And then the lobby issues that were found with, in the Section 8 area, have those issues been taken care of?
I will verify and get back to you. I'll make sure.
Yeah, but one of them is related to our Ring Central implementation, which we're still on schedule to complete around November 1st.
That's the call.
Yeah,
Okay.
The calls.
Yeah,
Yes,
that was going to be my question.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
one of them. And then the next one, I know Stephanie's.
As far as literature in more than one language, then, because especially in San Antonio, that with a lot of people that are Spanish speaking only, and we do have people that speak in Arabic and also in Russian and Farsi, we need to make sure that we can service those individuals also, that they can understand what we're putting out there.
Yes, sir. I'll get back to you on that one. I'll make sure I have it.
When these are just going to be like, I'm curious and, don't know what it means. So it's learning questions on my part. On the goal, there's controlled self-assessment. There were 2 different areas and we said, we'll complete at a later date.
Mhm.
What does that mean? Are you all deciding when to do it? Are you determining, or is there a actual goal that we have that we need to try to achieve?
So right now, I think we have the CSA for asset management scheduled to end in December, if I'm not mistaken. And then I have to verify when we're planning to end the one for security. But we will take a look later when we do the risk assessment to see if that's something we can add into the audit plan for next year.
Got it. So I think that's helpful to know. Like if we just see, we'll decide when we do it at a later date, on our end, it's like, what does that mean? Is it urgent? Are we making a decision to deprioritize and put it into the next year? A little more information would be helpful on that. Similar with the compliance audit, there was quite a bit that said ongoing. And so as a board member, I'm trying to figure out like, is that good? Is that bad? What does that mean for us? Is there a risk? Knowing that the whole intent behind auditing is to identify places where we might be out of compliance and ensure that we're, running a smooth process.
So for the compliance audits where it says assisted housing, public housing, and beacon, that's something we do every day.
Always,
So
it's just going to
always-
always be happening. Okay.
Always done, yes.
The auditing of files.
Correct, yes.
Okay,
And I have
that's
3
helpful,
staff
thank you.
members that do each program.
Okay.
So one per program.
Never ending, always
Never
to like
ending.
find stuff.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you so much. That's helpful. And then August 9th pending. I don't know what that was, but any other questions? Figure out what that was. Yeah.
I do have a question with regard to the control self-assessment process. Is there a kind of iterative check-in process during the control self-assessment so that the internal staff, I understand in that kind of process, it's the existing staff who are responsible for the program who are doing the assessment. And so is there a formal feedback process where we capture what staff are discovering and then that is acted on before the audit is implemented?
Yes, ma'am. So we have, the CSAs, we have meetings with asset management and their staff, and then security and a whole bunch of other departments as well, once a month. And so we are trying to get all that information together to develop these SOPs. And then we'll get with the rest of the asset management and security and HR, whoever else is involved, to figure out how we're going to implement this SOP and how we're going to train it.
That's great. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? I had one last question. I just wanted to understand what this meant from a practical standpoint. On the CDI self-sufficiency program escrow review process, can you tell me in layman's terms, like what is that going to mean for families who are a part of that program?
So these folks graduate with funds. They're put through a program where they go through training, understand how to be financially sufficient. And when they go through those programs, money is put into an escrow for them. So at the end of their graduation, they're entitled to those funds. And so they're no longer part of any type of program with Opportunity Home. No.
I understand the family self-sufficiency program.
Yeah.
What I was trying to, let me
Okay.
clarify my question. I'm so sorry. The streamline review to meet the changes of the program, like as you all are going and reviewing and approving, like what is this going to mean? And it said awaiting corrections. So I was just trying to understand, like, what does this mean for families who have been participating in?
Okay, so the waiting corrections, when internal audit receives a packet, we go through that packet and ensure that the proposed graduation amount is accurate. Anything over 5,000
Okay.
comes to internal audit. Once we receive that packet and we determine that there's something off with an amount, we send it back to CDI for corrections. Those corrections could be as simple as a signature, or the money is off by. It varies.
Okay.
So once those corrections are made, they send that back to internal audit. We review it, and then we either approve for graduation or send it back again for corrections. We only send it back twice until we deny it, and then we tell them, fix it, and then send it back to us once it's done.
Okay, got it. Thank you so
Yes.
much. That's helpful.
Okay.
So, but you understand how the FSS program works?
Yes, I just didn't understand what the audit process was doing and what it was going to mean for families, what corrections, did we find any major errors in like families who thought they were going to be getting a certain amount of escrow aren't, and there's something that the board should know about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are, we do find errors and we do find issues. And I think one of the things that Susan's working on as she comes back to be the director of CDI is working to improve those processes and ensuring that when we do have those conversations with our residents that are part of FSS, we're giving really good information so they have a better expectation when they graduate.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. All right. If there are no further questions, we're going to move on to adjourn the Finance Committee meeting.
Do you need a motion?
I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Finance meeting closed. I will pass it over to the Operation and Real Estate Committee. Chair.
Hello and welcome to Opportunity Home San Antonio's Operations and Real Estate Committee meeting. Do you need me to conduct roll call again?
No.
All right. The time is 1:45. You may call the meeting to order.
The Board of Commissioners or its committee may hold a closed meeting pursuant to Texas Government Code 5071-076 for consultation concerning attorney-client matters, real estate, litigation, personnel, and security matters. Committee reserves the right to enter into closed meeting at any time during the course of the meeting. Do we have any citizens to be heard?
Yes, we have one citizen signed up to speak. Please note, now is the time for citizens to be heard. Citizens will be given up to 3 minutes to speak. Note that the board will not discuss the comments of speakers or respond to speakers during the citizens to be heard portion of the agenda. Our speaker is Patricia Hammond Garza.
Hi, how y'all doing today? Well, the only thing that I really wanted to speak about was just more community involvement. After listening to everything that y'all were saying, y'all are pretty much on point. I appreciate all the help that us residents are getting, but I would like more community involvement, more security, pretty much just to keep, the property a lot more cleaner. And that's basically all. Thank you guys very, very much.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
That concludes our individuals signed up to speak for citizens to be heard.
Now we'll go into individual items. Consideration appropriate action regarding Resolution 6557, approving the refinance of the Converse Ranch 2 Apartments promissory note with Frost Bank in an amount not to exceed $4,250,000 to be secured by a mortgage lien on the Converse Ranch 2 Apartments and the Legacy at Crown Meadows Apartments, and guaranteed by the San Antonio Housing Facility Corporation, authorizing the acting president and CEO or designee to execute all documentation necessary to carry out the transaction, authorizing the acting president and CEO or designee to execute all documentation on receiving any necessary HUD approvals and other matters in connection therewith. Diana Fiedler, Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer.
Good afternoon. So this is a approval for
refi of Converse Ranch 2 apartments. Next slide, please. Converse Ranch 2 is actually located in Converse, Texas. So we'll make that correction there. So it's on Crestway Drive. It's the second phase. Next slide. So this is the second phase of the Converse Ranch apartments. We have phase 1, phase 2. They do operate as separate legal entities. This particular entity has 104 units. It has 83 with no income restriction and 21 public housing units. Next slide. So these are the refinance details. So we're going to refinance only the existing debt, which is just about $4 million. It's coming due on September 30th.
So the debt is due at this point. We will, Frost Bank has offered terms of up to $4.25 million or 75% of the appraised value of the collateral. The collateral is going, the loan's going to be secured by not only Commerce Ranch 2, but because of its inability to meet the debt service coverage ratio existing, right? Because of the existing net operating income, right? So we have to put up the legacy at Crown Meadows Apartments. And we're just really switching out that collateral. It's being collateralized by different apartments today that may need different type of work. So we're just sort of strategically replacing the collateral because Crown Meadows just had all of its debt paid off and it's in really good shape. The terms we're offering is 85.9% of the SOFR rate plus 1.58. That's a little over 6% today, but we usually take advantage of an interest rate swap. We use Hilltop as our consultant on that. And so the current indicative rates today are 4.44, but I think all of us are holding our breath for Jay Powell's press conference on Friday. And if not, September 18th. So obviously we're going to try to wait for the closing until after September 18th. So, but we're hoping for a better rate than that. So any questions?
Quick question just on the use of Crown Meadows. Is that a first lien on that property?
That will be because we did just pay that off. Frost Bank, though, are very good partners, right? And they do allow for a substitute collateral. So if we do find that there's something we need to do with the property, they allow it.
Switch out.
That's
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I make a motion that we move this required item to the board meeting.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Item 4, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6563 and 24FAC-08-21, authorizing the San Antonio Housing Facility Corporation to approve an inducement resolution for the proposed La Ventana Apartments transaction. Susan Ramos Sussman, Interim Director of Development Services and Neighborhood Revitalization.
Approval to move forward with the La Ventana project. This project is different from most of the projects that I've brought to you recently. This will follow a PFC structure, which is to provide workforce housing to middle-income families. The residents, 100% of the units will be restricted to residents earning 80% or below, and of that population will be less than 60% below AMI. We're currently looking at the MOU and the terms. We did use former PFC deals that we have made in the past as our baseline, and we're looking at, the terms for this project, and the deal terms look highly favorable and to our benefit. This project will be with a new developer, which is exciting. It's Marcus Equity Group. So we are, diversifying our developments with new partners. The development is located on the northwest side, as you can see on the map, which is a good place for workforce families. There's a lot of developments. There's a lot of businesses in surrounding area. It is District 6. You can see that the unit mix will have 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. And once again, it is a PFC deal. The pro forma is listed there, and this is the initial pro forma. As we move forward with the project, that we will be making modifications. And today, we are only requesting approval to move forward. We will come back for final approval once finances are complete. Any questions?
Are you anticipating any adjustments to the market rate in terms of AMI, or is that pretty much going to hold?
That is pretty much standard. Where's Miranda?
Yeah.
He's our PFC guru. So
I was in the wrong place for moral support. I'm sorry. We don't at this time, and under the statute, they're contractually obligated to have XYZ percentages, and so
Right.
what comes in is what's going to stay. So we don't anticipate anything changing.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just a point of clarification for new board members, when we induce an item, this actually just pushes it further down the line. As she had mentioned, it will come back to us for final approval. So this just keeps the process moving, so that way the developer can get to the point to where they need to be.
Correct me if I'm wrong. What does PFC stand for?
Public Facility Corporation. If I can give you a flyer, you were not here last time for my fancy flyer. So
Okay, I would love a fancy flyer. I guess what's in my mind, and it's just another me and my questions to learn. Usually, I don't know that since I've been on the board, we've seen that structure of AMI before. And so my brain's like, what are we approving and why this time? So just a little background on that would be helpful.
Yeah, so this is workforce housing. So this is sort of the missing middle that we're trying to capture for. And so it is typically, I believe Josephine was the same structure. Was that correct? Yeah, Joseph Go and Calabria Commons were the same set aside structure. And that is the section 302 or 303, I can get which one is correct in of the Texas law, states that it has to be those percentages. And so if we're bringing a PFC deal, it will be with those set asides at a minimum. We can go lower, but at a minimum, we must meet those.
Okay, got it. And so really when it's like, what's in it for us? Okay, what's in it for us is I'm just for understanding is the developer fees, right? Like that's increasing some of that revenue that we have access to.
Yeah,
do other work.
It's the developer fee, it's the cash flow, it's the percentage of shared appreciation on sale. If you remember Calabria Commons, we made almost $7 million on that deal. And for the Housing Authority to be able to solve for the missing people that make too much to qualify for the very low set asides, but don't make enough to basically pay market rent, as well as it helps us with bringing money to the agency to fund the things that like public housing that we can't necessarily pay for with HUD funding.
Thank you
Does
for
that
that.
make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Of course, you
So-
can always ask a question.
Would you say this type of activity is helpful to us as we face uncertainty about future budgets? And we've just been hearing about deficits, and I've read about HUD has been promoting a type of structure called a mixed income district, where development of property at different income levels, then the income from that or the revenue from that is then fed back in to the district to provide additional funding for extremely low and very low income properties. That sounds like we don't have a district or a formal title for it, but that sounds kind of like what we have been doing, is finding other sources of revenue when HUD or the federal government kind of fails us.
So PFCs are a wonderful opportunity to do the things that our mission dictates that we do, that necessarily the dollars that were given by the mission or HUD, if you will, don't really support the work. And so that's the reason that we want to do PFCs. PFCs also allow for, because it is a mixed income, you don't have the concentration of poverty. They allow other developers that we might not necessarily have worked with, they get the tax abatement, we get some of the cash flow and the developer fee, and it's a scratch your back, I'll scratch my back kind of a thing, and it really is good for the community. And it also supports doing the work that we want to do.
Thank you.
I think that's really good to add in context. Like these slides are great. I always think of like, how will we document, like, how did this board make decisions? The decisions that we're making, and how that part of like, why should we do this? Goals that we have, how is it going to advance what we're committed to in terms of housing? Full context for us to name in these public settings as well. And it's just helpful for me to have confidence in a vote too. So thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I have a comment. I just want to say that I'm glad that these PFC deals are coming back to be able to make the organization a little more solvent and to be able to take care of the public housing issues that we have, that we get these extra monies in. I understand that some people in public housing may not understand why we're doing this, but in the long run, we're doing it to help that other segment of the community that don't fit into the public housing realm, but also cannot buy market or rent market rate apartments. So it helps them out. And then in the long run, it helps our public housing residents also.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Had we not been in a position or decided not to induce this project, there are other PFCs that could play that role. Is that correct?
Yes, there are other organizations, developers that could play that role. We're excited to expand on this, I guess, arena that we're working for. We have done this with 2 or 3 other development companies, and we would like to do more of these deals. They're good for everybody. And so is it Marcus Group?
Marcus Equity.
Marcus
And
Equity, yeah.
we're also looking at other PFC deals, and it's exciting with this developer is that if this would work out, he has 2 other locations in different parts of the city, and which is an added feature is that these PFC deals we're seeing that they're in different parts of the city that we're normally not developing in.
So it's not as though this project wouldn't get built. What we're doing by participating with the PFC is securing resources for public housing.
And there's other avenues that they could go to the housing trust for the funds as well, but they're coming to us because they want to align with our mission, and we would like to align with theirs as well. And so, as Susan did say, there are other deals, and she is exactly correct. They're in areas that we don't have opportunities to go into.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Commissioners, if I can just add to Miranda's point, there are very few federal and state tools, financial tools for us to provide revenue streams and expand affordable housing. So we need to maximize every single tool that we have. And if we don't do it, someone else will. And so we want to really be leaders in this space.
Any other questions or comments? So do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, consideration appropriate action regarding Resolution 6561, authorizing the Las Vadas Public Facility Corporation to approve inducement resolutions for the proposed tax-exempt bond financing of Phase 1 of the Bristol at the Preserve Apartments project. Susan Ramos Sussman, Interim Director of Development Services and Neighborhood Revitalization.
Thank you. And if I can I present on both of them? Because they're both the same apartments. It's just Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Item 5 and 6?
Yes.
Okay.
So today we're asking for authority to file applications for the Bristol at the Preserve Apartments Phase 1 and 2. This is more of a traditional project that I've been bringing to you. This is a 4% deal. It is located in a bus lane area that we've been developing in close to Bristol at Somerset and other projects that we've been investing in. And you can see that all A&M, Texas A&M San Antonio, and there's a lot of development happening in that area. This is late in the application process for the 4%. We've previously come to y'all for approval on other projects, but we are receiving information that there might be some volume cap left over. So they're wanting to get in line. If we are approved to get in line, we will then be notified if volume cap is available, and if that happens, we will come back for final approval. Like I mentioned, it's 2 phases. I think it's 348 and 384 for each phase. They are, of course, located in that area that I showed you, Southwest Independent School District, District 4, and it's going to be a variation between 30%, 50%, and 70% AMI. And that's for Phase 1. Phase 2, very similar. The design, this is Papoon is a developer that we've worked with. He uses similar design on his projects. That's a picture of the Majestic Ranch, which was award-winning. We do have the performance for each. And once again, Lewis Papoon is a developer that we have a lot of confidence in, and we've had a really good working relationship. Any questions?
Was that both of them?
Mhm.
Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
I motion we approve items 5 and 6.
Do I hear a
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 7, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6560, authorizing the ratification of an emergency procurement for HVAC unit installation for Cottage Creek 1 to JRV Construction LLC, HABE, for an amount not to exceed $907,522. George Ayala, Director of Procurement.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today, we're bringing forward a contract that was issued to JRB Construction for the amount of $907,521.48. The purpose of this is to ratify the contract as we awarded it based on the emergency procurement as exempt from Texas Local Government Code 252. This contract is for 160 units that will be installed at Cottage Creek 1 to be exact. This is also part of the bond funding, the city bond funding. So it will be, the source of funds will be from the city bond funding. This particular, just so you know, even though this is an emergency procurement, we did take some steps in order for us to guarantee ourselves the lowest price. We did issue an IFP. When we did issue that IFP, that was considered not cost efficient for us to proceed at that point in time. Then we went ahead and looked at different alternatives for us to proceeding with the project. And then we went ahead and did the emergency IFP where we got these particular contract awarded from. Originally the ranges from for this exact project range from 900,000 to almost 1.8 million. And when we went the second time around, we did see a dramatic decrease in the pricing as well for the whole complete project. At this point in time, do you all have any questions for me?
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Is there AC in the system in there now?
Yes, sir. There are certain units that are there. There, from what I understand, there is a combination from central air units and window units as well. These are getting replaced as they are becoming down.
Right.
But because of the temperatures outside, we're trying to see if we can replace all these units before failing.
So just remind me then, we have ongoing work at Cottage Creek, correct? But we're trying to expedite this portion particularly because of the heat issues.
Yes, and not only the heat, but when it comes to the winter months, these units would also provide
Right,
heat to our residents.
okay. But this is a piece of a bigger project that we've already seen.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8, we will table until after the closed session. We'll discuss this in closed session and come back into open session with it. Item 9, update and discussion regarding the quarterly operations report. Kristen Carrion, Director of Operations Support.
Good afternoon. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, so I have quite a bit of information here, but I'm going to try to keep it to the highlights of the report. I had previously presented this a while back. I think it's been over a year now when we were first formulating the report and putting it together for the first time. And it's been part of the packets now on a quarterly basis for at least a year, if not a little longer. Next slide, please. So just to give you some information, this report is supposed to be provided quarterly. Last quarter, we did not provide it. So this actual report here is representative of the last 6 months, from January to June of 2024, so that we can encompass all of that time frame. It's put together, again, by the Ops Support Team, our department, and it's reporting out on the operations departments, assisted housing programs, public housing, CDI, and Beacon, as well as the wait lists, and that information is located on here. Next slide. So just some overview of what we're hoping to present through this report is major aspects of operating activities. So how are we doing with our occupancy, our voucher utilization, our housing quality conditions? In addition to that, how are we measuring the success of our resident engagement, our community outreach at various levels? So because we're an MTW agency, we don't have to abide by the what's called CMAP and FOS measurements that other PHAs do. But this was meant to be sort of a our replacement of that, but to encompass more than that and directly tie it into our resident outcomes. Next slide. So regarding occupancy and utilization, this information is as of June 30th, so it's not representing average of this time frame, the January to June. Because of that, some of these numbers may differ. So I just wanted to note that time frame. The voucher programs we have as of June 30th at 98.02%, and off of our internal goal to utilize 11,600 vouchers specifically. This was actually an increase from our last quarterly report, which was at 95.33%. So we have increased quite a bit since then. For public housing, as of June 30th, we're at 96.10%. This was actually a slight decrease from the beginning of quarter four, which saw us at a 96.6% occupancy rate. We do attribute this to the notices to vacates that had gone out in April and May, because some families did choose to vacate their units at that time frame and moved out of the unit. And then Beacon Communities we have at 78.74%. So this is a decrease. At the end of quarter two, we were at 84.82%. And so there's a few things that happened during that time frame. One is that we brought in Mid-Crown, transitioned that property over. So that unit count increased from 3,821 to 4,017. So because of that and the lease-up process, we do see that change in occupancy rate. But we also know that Dietrich, which has a smaller inventory of 30 units, that had a 7% decrease in occupancy as well. In addition to that, we had about 457 move-outs from January to June. So the same process there, where notices of vacates were issued, and so we're seeing those families move out. Any questions on occupancy or utilization? Okay.
Would there be any consideration to providing the economic occupancy, so kind of compared to projected this for the public housing, similar to what's going to be provided or on an ongoing basis for the Beacon portfolio?
We can definitely.
We can add that.
Yeah.
And then, thank you. And then could you just clarify for me the difference between abandoning a unit and moving out?
So there's a difference in that sometimes they will move out with notice versus just leaving without notice, and so that would be deemed an abandoned unit, especially if they have left belongings there. And there's a process then at that point where we have to ensure that we're following steps in accordance with the Texas Code of Conduct in ensuring we're removing their belongings according to that process. So that's typically how we code that abandoned unit status.
Thank you.
Next slide. Housing quality conditions. So for our voucher programs, these are the housing quality standards. We're still on HQS standards. Inspire, which we had previously thought we would be implementing this year, was actually delayed to October 1st of 2025. So we're still doing HQS inspections in the voucher programs. Right now, as of quarter 4, you can see we're at 88.65%. As far as the pass rate goes, that pass rate is represented based off of, I believe, let me double check that. It includes initial inspections and re-inspections that resulted in a pass status. So essentially, even though the inspector may have gone out to the unit, they found some deficiencies, they had to come back out. If that, follow-up inspection resulted in a pass inspection, we are counting that as a pass inspection on the report. In public housing, we have started Inspire inspections. And so last report, we had started the process of the Inspire inspections, but not received any scores at that time. So this is the first time that we have been able to include Inspire scores. So from January to June 2024, 11 Inspire inspections were completed and scored. And a few additional properties are currently under HUD review and pending scores, but we have those 11 scores on the next slide. And you can see here that because in Inspire, a 60 is considered passing, that all of the properties that were inspected did pass according to Inspire. Now, there are some additional criteria of how the scores play out. So if a property receives a score above 90, they then can, that's considered a excellent score, and HUD would not review or inspect that property again for another 3 years. If they receive a score above 80 or 80 to 90, it's considered, a good score still, but they would come back in 2 years. For anything below that, specifically 60 to 80, they would be coming back annually. It's still passing, but it's still enough to warrant another inspection the following year. So we have here about 5 properties that would be inspected within the next 3 years, 4, 2 years, and then 2 next year. And there's additional information here about which of those are outside managed properties, which of those are beacon communities, which is hard to see on the slide, I know. But let me know if you have any questions on that.
I do have a question about what the areas, were there a few areas where Olive Park, Village East, and Refugio Street scored quite low, or was it just across the board that there were a lot of small challenges or a couple big challenges?
Do you have information?
Hello, thank you for that question. There were actually findings inside the units, and then we did have some health and safety findings, and so the health and safety were corrected within 24 hours.
That's great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, next slide, please. So capital improvements, the major one is Victoria Plaza. So even though Victoria Plaza had recently undergone renovations, it does need a roof replacement. So that project, in addition to a few others, is going to be made possible through the COSA Housing Bond awarded in 2023. So in addition to the roof replacement, which you can see in the photo here, we are also looking at installing a solar panel system, new gutters and downspouts, power washing of the entire structure, some crack repairs, and rain cisterns to collect rain runoff for future irrigation. So this project is expected to be completed by January 2025. Some future capital improvements that have had not quite kicked off at the time of creating this report, but are expected in this fiscal year include Riverside Apartments. So 23 multi-residential units are looking at exterior renovations. And then for Cassiano Apartments, window replacements, which is to commence in August of this year, this month. Any questions? Next slide, please. So here we have some updates regarding our programs in CDI. This represents the average number of program participants that we've seen in these three major programs in CDI. Family Self-Sufficiency Program, we have 986, but we ended Q4 actually at 1,000. Since the last report, we've seen that steadily grow, and that that increase has really been evident. The team cites new implementation of outreach, data-driven outreach methods, staff training sessions, door-to-door outreach efforts that have really enabled us to grow those numbers. We entered the Q4 at 478, average at 436. That has grown as well. To a new move-in checklist and working with the public housing staff and their team to capture new move-ins and residents visiting the office. And then Jobs Plus program, we have 115. So Jobs Plus hosted several job building events focused on development. There's been proactive marketing efforts, ensuring that the property was filled with advertisements promoting the program information and effectively.
I have a quick question on these. Do we have a goal for how many families we are trying to reach with each of these programs, and how does this actual compare to that goal?
I will, if you have an answer to that. And we can definitely include that as part of this report.
It's always one of those things which, like, when you report a number by itself, it's like, okay, cool. How does that compare to, like, we were wanting to reach 2,000 families and we're reaching 500 versus we wanted to reach 400 and we're reaching, like, it helps put the number in context.
Right. So the FS is funded for 50, a minimum of 50 per case manager or service coordinator. And there's a total of 9 and 8, 17. So times 50 would be the minimum. We always aspire to do more. Our goal has always been closer to the 70 per staff member. And I think just looking at it, and we can do some reporting to show that not everybody is active. So you can have, newcomers at year one, and then you have folks that are already exiting, and then that's a cumulative for the year. So it's not total number active at that time. So, as I transitioning over to CDI, that's I'm going to do a deep dive into the data and see where our opportunities are and start tracking it as cohorts, so we can really easily tell you there's so many that are year one, year two, year three, and then we can anticipate the graduates year 5.
Awesome.
And then for Ross, it's 3 staff members, and they have a multitude of properties. They're at practically every, and their goal is to assess at least of each of the assigned properties. So it's 400, but there's no ceiling to it. So that number could increase.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful.
Can I ask Susan before you sit down? I'm sorry. So it sounds like the limiting factor here is the availability of staff for the program.
For Ross, it's very different. So Ross, it's not a program where you're enrolled and you're getting regular services. It's more of assessing and referring out to community partners.
I was actually thinking of the FSS program.
And that we're waiting to come out because that number will tell us based on numbers served the previous year, the eligibility. So there could be a possibility that number can go up, but HUD will determine how many positions we can apply for.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Next slide, please. New partnerships and grants. So we were awarded a $148,000 grant from the Nancy Smith Hurd Foundation. So these funds are going to be used to upgrade computer labs, provide laptops to residents who complete Connect Home digital literacy training, and expand the Loaner Laptop Program for public housing and HCV residents. We were also awarded a $11,900 grant through AARP to provide technology upgrades to computer labs at 10 elderly disabled communities and expand our older adults technology services digital literacy training at these sites. And as well as continuing our partnership with Duseum through their professional learning community training for Opportunity Home residents. The training was a part of a trauma-informed care initiative to bring awareness to residents, and a part of that set some expectations for the Duseum Family Nights, providing the opportunities for families to engage with other residents through those social activities at the Family Nights. And then lastly, a new partner we have, River City Federal Credit Union. That's when this partnership began, and will be providing a financial literacy series to elderly disabled residents and FSS program participants.
Here, my organization also received one of these AARP grants, and I was talking to someone, and she said, well, Opportunity Home received this grant. I said, well, so did we. And she said, yeah, but they're all over social media, and I had no idea that you'd gotten one. So clearly, you are doing something really well to get that information out there.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. Community engagement. So several things. One, we've been engaging in dialogue with Neighborhood Housing Services Department, or NHSD, with the city. We executed a data sharing agreement actually to work with them with the families that accrued rental balance from March to June of 2024, or what we've been calling our pandemic era family. That collaboration with other local partners to assist and that included a D5 housing resource in May of this year. Additionally, we hosted a collaborative connections partners, hosted the collaborative connections partners on Friday, June 28th at the Eastside Education and Training Center located at Dietrich. So this was to increase our partnership initiatives and events. There were a few partner organizations that actually participated, including the Workforce Solutions Alamo, YWCA, Communities in Schools, Credit Human, and Neighborhood Housing Services of San Antonio. Our UAC team, which is our waitlist team, actually presented at that event in order to raise awareness of housing assistance programs available to those who were able to attend. And then lastly, Opportunity Home and stakeholders work together. The Resident Services Department, and that needs to be updated to CDI, hosted resident council elections for Victoria Plaza, Marie McGuire, and Via Trancasi. So resident participation packets requesting funds from HUD to establish these resident councils were also submitted and approved for Fair Avenue, Sun Park, Via Hermosa, Via Trancasi, and Lewis Chatham. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide, please. So I had mentioned Mid-Crown already. So those were 196 new units that were increased the supply in Beacon to 4,717 total units. We have some upcoming figures, upcoming new supply in fiscal year 24-25 for Beacon as well. San Juan Square 1, Alhambra Senior, Artisan at Mission Creek, and Elon Gardens. And that would be a total of 763 units with all of those four properties combined. And then for a voucher, we actually applied for additional foster youth to independence or FYI vouchers. So we had actually previously received 25 FYI vouchers in 2023. These vouchers are specifically targeted to youth aging out of foster care and who are at risk of homelessness. So as of now, we're actually still awaiting announcement of the awards. And so we're hoping to hear back from HUD soon on that. Next slide, please. And then our wait list. So quite a bit of information here, but we have about 115,816 applicants as of June 30th. And this is the cumulative number of applicants on all of our waiting lists, the Housing Choice Voucher Program, Project-Based Voucher, Mod Rehab, and Public Housing wait lists. Underneath that figure, we have the breakdown of applications for each of the programs. So public housing, we have 69,496, HCV 17,125, and PBV 38,442. And our mod rehab program, 49,522. So I really just wanted to mention, you know, all the write-up here. We're working on some initiatives to effectively manage all these waiting lists and conduct outreach to a lot of these applicants and see whether they're still interested in remaining on the wait list, and also potentially help speed up their wait time. So first, we are in the process of conducting outreach to those who were on the wait list for Sorrento Apartments. That is on the mod rehab program, and the Sorrento Apartments were actually sold and transitioned to new ownership in October of 2023, ending the property's partnership with Opportunity Home. We had about a little over 1,000 families on that waitlist who had not applied to anything else. So we did some outreach there and let them know of their opportunities to apply to other waitlists, and especially to our Beacon properties, which typically have shorter waitlists. So we did that outreach, and now we are working on conducting the outreach to the other 28 or so thousand families who had applied, but had applied to other wait lists as well. So we're letting them know you are no longer, you know, this wait list is no longer available, but you are still on these other wait lists, you know, to just let them know that they still have a place on a wait list. And many have multiple wait lists.
Excuse me, can you clarify outreach? Like, are you calling? What does that outreach look like?
Sure, we're sending notices to them through email, and typically we also try and conduct a second method of communication via email or text message as well, to make sure that we're reaching them if they've updated their address or if they've updated their email address as well.
You mentioned a second ago that that we reach out to them to find out, one, if they're still interested, if they're still within the parameters of our program.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way for, given that the numbers continue to grow, and I sort of feel like the wait list numbers, once it exceeded 100,000, it's sort of losing its impact, though it shouldn't, given just the sheer number of families or individuals that are on there. But is there a way for us to some sort of timeline that if they're on the wait list for 90, 120, I know before they had a certain amount of time that they could be on, but we extended that. Is there a way that it automatically cycles them off, just so that way, or some of these maybe scrubbing of these numbers? Some of the questions that the commissioners had asked before, how many of these are double reported? And although we feel now comfortable that they are not double reported,
Mm-hmm.
although they may be on different program lists,
Right.
the numbers still reflect accurate people on wait list. I'm just looking for ways creating a project that's going to deliver the sheer number of units needed. There's not a way for us to impact this quicker. What methods are we doing or can we implement that's going to start impacting this faster? And it might just be contact. But if we're mailing, how many people are actually reading their mail? I mean, we have personally walked the communities and just seen, handful of mail on doors that people. Okay, is there a different way for us to contact? That type of thing. I guess we want to make sure that we are impacting the wait list numbers. How do we do that? I mean, what are we exploring every opportunity? And I don't know what all those opportunities are. So.
Yes, so we have explored a system upgrade to do what you had mentioned, which is automatically send something out via the portal that they've already applied on, and if it's connected to their email, and if they select yes, I'm still interested, it keeps them on the wait list. If they don't respond, it removes them. There were some concerns about that just because we still find a technology barrier for a lot of our residents, and especially with our portal. I think it's gotten better, but we know that even our applicants keeping up to date with their email is a struggle. And so they would need to not only be able to access their portal comfortably, but also be able to access their email address. So what we're working now, we're hoping to of the public housing applicants. The goal is by the end of the year, in order to see if they're still interested. And also a lot of these individuals are still on the preferred development wait list. So just some historical background, we used to have the public housing wait list was split between all of the public housing developments. So if you were interested in applying, you would select, and Casiano and, other public housing property, sorry. So they would stay within those wait lists, but what we found was those properties that were more desirable, their wait list just really expanded. So we have, for example, Hemisphere, which has the most, and that's like a wait list of 10 years time. And so it's very lengthy. And so we closed down those preferred development wait lists, and we now have the 3 main wait lists for elderly, disabled, family, and 504 accessible. Those wait lists are going through really quickly, but we still have to exhaust all of the preferred development wait lists and make sure that those individuals are still being pulled ahead of the individuals who have applied on the 3 main wait lists. So it's a lot of coordination with that team in ensuring that is happening properly. But what we really want to do is conduct that outreach to those who remain on the preferred development wait list, let them know, hey, if you're still interested in the public housing wait list, let us know. And in addition to that, we're going to be moving you over to the main wait list with your time and date. But at that point, you will be receiving the first available property so that we can cut down on that wait time.
I have two questions. So in that new scenario, if you're moved from waiting for Hemisphere to any property and they say, all right, we have a unit at Casiano, and you turn that unit down, do you then go back on the wait list or do you have to reapply?
You would have to reapply unless you had a reasonable cause for turning down that property. And so that could include a reasonable accommodation need. It could include a need to be closer to medical care. And we've also looked at a need to be closer to education and that need as well.
And then another question, looking at this pool of applicants by family type and thinking about our actual portfolio of all of our current clients, it looks like about 1 in 4 of these applicants is a disabled, elderly, or both. how does that compare to our existing group of residents that we're serving?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I can definitely get that. I think that's an interesting comparison. And that's the next slide, if you would, Devlin.
Oh, sorry.
The breakdown in family type, yes.
I'd like to have both pages open.
Yes, we can definitely get that information.
Have.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at half the folks who are applying for public housing are one-person household.
Mhm.
And trying to understand where's the overlap between that and our elderly? And are there a lot of folks who are just looking for a type of property that we don't have in our portfolio, and they could wait a long, long time because what they're looking for is not going to turn up? Because I know that we do place more quickly off of the elderly and disabled list than we do off of the other lists.
Well, what we usually see is that the elderly disabled properties have less turnover than the family properties. So those typically go through a little bit quicker. I did anticipate that question regarding the supply with that one household member. And I can tell you that we have about, so if an individual has one household member, their household has one person, they are eligible for a 0 or a 1-bedroom unit. So an efficiency or a 1-bedroom. We have about 92 0 and 1-bedroom units available. So you could see where that supply and the demand don't quite line up. But I can definitely, to your question about supply, provide that information as well.
92 units available as in they're vacant right now and ready for move-in, or 92 units across
the portfolio? Yeah. In our inventory, yes.
So we've got almost half the folks applying for public housing would only qualify for a 0 or 1-bedroom, but we have fewer than 100 units. That's interesting. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I can just add to what Commissioner Lopez said about the wait list. I know there's one thing about communication and kind of going through the system, but I want to remind ourselves about the bottleneck that public housing has experienced in the last 4 years. Typically, the tenure of a public housing resident is about 6 years in our program. But for the last 4 years, that has been stagnant. There's been no movement. So in a typical cycle, folks move out, there's folks moving from the wait list, but that has just been completely stopped. So as we continue going back to normal, families exit the program after their 6 years of tenure or under, then we bring folks from the wait list. So we'll start seeing that cyclical kind of movement happening in due time.
Thank you, Michael. That's a great point. Okay, any other questions? Next slide, please. So client services. So this is our team that manages the phone calls and the lobby at central office, as well as emails to help@homesa.org. So from January to June, we received about 72,134 calls. This is actually a decrease from July to December. That time frame, we received 95,193 calls. We have a total number of emails at 5,540, a slight dip. The last 6 months previous were 6,210, and then total number of lobby visits, 22,188. Just a slight dip again. Last 6 months, it was 23,590. Regarding future improvements, I'm sorry, I skipped over top inquiries. Those are typically the same, but they'll switch around. Waitlist status, general inquiries, and RAD-10 submissions. RAD-10s are forms that our staff send out to ask for additional documentation in order to complete a process, an eligibility process or recertification process. So that's typically a lot of the questions that are received in the lobby or through phone. We are looking at call center upgrades. I know that was mentioned with Ring Central. So that's something that we're actively working on, and we're hoping that implementation will come in Q2. So we're looking at new features such as callback and queue, interactive voice response, smart call routing, and voicemail routing. And we're also looking at upgrades in the internal reporting through analytics and dashboards, because a lot of this is actually manual tracking from the team. And so we're hoping that that improves that process. Okay. Any questions?
The Ring Central, is there going to be a way, and possibly this is a question for you. Like when people leave messages or emails or whatever, is there going to be a tracking method that you see that people have actually responded from staff to that call?
Yes, all that for yes. Yes, she mentioned the reporting that we're going to be able to do in the analytics as well. There's also a way that we're going to be able to put in disposition codes. Right now, the staff is actually manually tracking every call on a Google Sheet. Now they're going to be able to put it within the portal that they're accessing at the time, and we're going to have drop-down lists that they're going to be able to choose the type of call, and then we're going to be able to run analytics against them.
That's great.
We're very excited. We're working real hard on it with the work group, and we're actually looking at our total business model and how we're approaching it today, how we're going to improve it, how we're going to train our staff, and of course the coming phases that are going to come. This is just the first part of what we're going to do, so we're very excited.
That's great. I can't imagine keeping track of over 72,000 lines. on a
They're
Google Sheet.
actually doing, and I mean they try real hard. They're doing an amazing job. But
Do you all notice a difference between what brings someone into the building physically versus a phone call? Like, are folks coming in physically because there's a more escalated concern, more like, is there anything that the data can tell us about?
Not necessarily that the data can tell us, because, we want to make that more robust, but I can say that it's typically because they haven't been able to reach out through phone. So it's typically they have a question, they're trying to get to us via phone, but they're not able to, and so they come into the lobby.
And what are the lobby hours?
To 5 p.m.
Every day?
Every day except for p.m. And we usually do training for staff in the mornings.
No Saturday hours for, like, if this is the place, well, they could, I guess, go to their, I'm answering my own question. I'm like, if they live somewhere, they could go there, but if they're on the wait list, this is the only place they could go. Not here, but yeah.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I just wanted to also add, if they're submitting paperwork and they're not technology savvy, that will also more likely have to our lobby, because they can't submit it through the phone or email, or they might need assistance in learning how to do that for our processes. And so you're going to see more of that lobby. It would be submissions as a part of that process.
And last question, I know that there were a lot of changes with, like, who's physically in the building and who's not with COVID and all of that. When folks come in person and get here and they have like a very, significant need, they've come out of their way to try to make it to central office, do they typically have the access to help on the spot? Or is it like, we'll get your information and we'll get back to you?
So currently our staff actually does come in 4 days out of the week. They have one remote day unless we don't have a desk. We do have more staff than we do desks situation at this time. And so what they do is, if there could be a rotating person who would come out, most likely a supervisor if it's escalated to that point, where if it's a dire need or any of those, instead of reaching out to an individual person who might be processing. But also the customer service team will have either supervisors on that side sit down with them to kind of go over what the information is. And we reach out to anybody who might be able to assist them. If it's public housing, that's a little bit harder. We normally do have to refer them back to either their property, or if there's a person that is actually at the central office that might be able to talk with them, we do try to reach out that way.
Got it. Thank you.
And for our newest commissioner, that is Stephanie Rodriguez. That's our Director of Assisted Housing Program. She oversees our vouchers. And our colleague prior to her, that was Joanna Alvarado. She's our Chief Information Officer.
Thank you.
Commissioner Contreras, I just wanted to add, a lot of times they do come in because calling in and navigating the phone system at central office is difficult at times. So, and it's hard to reach somebody or find the person that you need to speak to.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that'll all be alleviated with the new Ring Central.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? That's the end of my slides, I believe. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
It's a wonderful report. Thank you. It's very easy to read and understand.
Thanks for putting it together.
I guess next we're going to have our operations report, vacancy overview, Ruth Bautista and Miranda Castro. Ruth Bautista, our Director of Public Housing.
Good afternoon. Our focus today will be on those properties that have over 10 vacant units. I am glad to say as of yesterday, we have increased our occupancy percentage to 95.9. They do have strategies that they are implementing right now. And Amazon, for instance, I know that when we ran this report, we had 37 vacant units. I'm glad to say that we have 10 move-ins that are scheduled this week. One of the strategies that were implemented is that they are now implementing a two-man maintenance team that's in motion, and their goal is to complete 5 make-readies a week. And these are for our smaller units. Units as of today, and we have 3 move-ins that are scheduled. One of the strategies that Lincoln is implementing, instead of having check-ins with their make-ready contractor, they are increasing those to daily check-ins. That means that our maintenance supervisors are on site in the unit just to check on the progress and see if we can offer any additional assistance, material, guidance, or address any concerns that they have. In addition, with Lincoln Heights, we're also provide eligibility appointments for the new applicants. It's been a little while since we've done that, and so I know that we might be able to squeeze one in. Parkview Apartments, we have I'm glad to say that we have 8 that are, and right now we do have on-site in-person eligibility appointments that are actually in progress right now. So that's a win-win for us. Also, Parkview continues their ongoing recruitment efforts with Haven for Hope. So that's a relationship we've been able to build for over a year now. So we're happy about that. With Via Trancasey and Blanco Apartments, I know we do have 11 at Via Trancasey and 10. We are glad to say that we are having an ongoing partnership with CHCS. Our MOU is near completion. So those units have been placed on reservation for them. So we're looking for new move-ins by the end of the month. So that will decrease our vacant units and increase their occupancy by the end of the month. For Casiano, I know that we have 10 vacant units. We are glad to say that we have 3 move-ins that are scheduled this week. And of course, they are increasing their their monthly check-ins with contractors are actually having them bi-weekly now. And some of those units that have been experiencing trouble to move persons in or applicants to accept the units, they are implementing unit upgrades to decrease unit offer rejections. So they're being creative within their budget so that we can make them more attractive.
Quick question before you move on.
Yes.
I noticed that we have some partnerships with Center for Healthcare Services at a few of the properties. Are we looking at expanding that partnership with all of our senior disabled properties, being that there are the issues with the disabled and the mental health issues that disturb with the seniors? And are we looking at Center for Healthcare Services maybe being able to work with these individuals when they have problems?
I do appreciate that observation because I can understand how it can change our population, especially at our properties that are 80-20. I am glad to say that CHCS will have an on-site representative, a counselor 5 days out of the week. Just like we have at Victoria Plaza. They'll also be having that at Via Trancasey and at Blanco. What I have asked is that for a report card every 60 days, just to kind of share what progress we've been making on the property and what issues we are addressing and where we can help them. And then I'm also expecting feedback and requested feedback from the managers on how this transition has occurred and what are some wins and learns as we take away. So we're having those. And I think I know from Victoria Plaza, I haven't received one yet. And so having the conversation about identifying via Trincasi and Blanco for that partnership, in order to make that decision, I'd like to get some information on a report card to see if we can explore implementing that throughout public housing. But at this time, I don't have any plans beyond Blanco.
And I think Parkview would be another, as I mean, I do know residents that live there, and so I think they would be another party that would be good to look into
We could do
that partnership.
Okay, thank you. That. Any other questions? About occupancy?
Okay, now 109 here, that's public housing properties, or that's just these?
Top 6 properties.
So what's the total amount of vacancies for all public?
All of public housing, roughly, I checked almost 2 weeks ago, we have like about 258. That's not considering the move-ins that we did or that we're planning this week.
And I'm just going to move off real quick, but Beacon Properties, it says 554. There are more than 554 vacancies in Beacon?
Yes, there are more than 550.
And what would that total be?
I would get that for you. I apologize. I don't have the exact total.
So right now with the numbers, I mean, there's 812 vacancies and we have all these people on the waiting list. Are they down units? Are they need make readies? Is our provider for make readies, the contractor for make readies, are they not moving at a good enough speed that we need, that we have on, that we can't get people into those homes and off the wait list?
So keep in mind, the wait list is not reflective of Beacon. That is a global issue separate from our wait list. So your public housing wait list would only be for public housing units, because Beacon oftentimes does not have subsidy. Now, there are some public housing units within Beacon that would be counted in Ruth's overall vacancy. If you don't have any more questions for Ruth, I can go into the Beacon completely release.
Well, I was just wondering also too, 258 vacancies in public housing. I know you say there are some move-ins happening, but why can't we? I mean, there's people that have been waiting for years. Why can't we get people moved in at a faster rate?
Thank you for that question. Out of the 250, we do have about roughly 87 units that are on capital hold, meaning that they have extensive repairs. They can require mold, asbestos abatement. We do have some that are on capital hold due to a fire that we've sustained not that long ago. I do have a maintenance superintendent team that is addressing those units, especially for mold and asbestos. We want to get those back up and running and available in our maintenance hold. So there is an initiative to push those. Right now, for our available units, I know that there was a bottleneck that we discovered. And so what I'm glad to say is that part of the eligibility that's coming in with our applicants, to match those applicants to our vacant available units, those duties now are moving from central office out into the field, where we have more manpower to process these applications of these requests. So that's a win for us, and it's a win for the applicants because it's a faster turnaround. So I do see that barrier and that roadblock or that bottleneck being removed. And so we would be able to house our applicants a lot faster. So those are some internal strategies that we're exploring and that we have explored. And we're actually in the middle of that transition right now with Ms. Kristen Carrion and our ops support team.
In the future, when you give us this report, if you could break out that those units, and I would call them down units because they can't be made ready. There's issues that are happening that take longer. But how many down units you have, or because of greater issues versus the ones that just need to be make ready? If y'all could separate that. And also give us a total, not just, the top 6 properties. You can do that, but also give us the additional units and the total number.
Sir, we sent that out to the board about a week or so ago
Right, but it was a complete, all the properties with the total number, but they're telling, to me, I was looking at that people could move into that many units, and she's telling me that some of those units are not habitable at this time. So if y'all could make that difference so we can see what the difference is.
Okay, but in the future, do you want all the properties listed?
Right, the way you sent it, but also if you could put, like she said, what I call down units, but the uninhabitable units, and then the ones that could be made ready.
Absolutely. I can do that for you, sir.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just reiterate what Ruth mentioned, in the last few years, we added some red tape to the process, and right now we're in the process of breaking up that red tape.
I have your numbers for you. I just didn't have them in my head. So Beacon has 4,016 units total. 89 of those are down for various reasons. Some 722 of those are vacant as of yesterday, and 54 are pre-leased. And I can go into more specific details if you would like.
Now, those 722 vacant units, people with vouchers can move into those correctly?
That is correct, pending their voucher meets the rent that we're asking.
Okay. Are these people notified that these units are available if they wish to move into them, or do they have to, or when they get their voucher, they have to go out on their own and look? Is there somewhere they can go that says, hey, these units are available?
So we can't target people and we can't steer them into
Right,
our
I
units
understand that,
specifically, but we have them listed. What we have marketing listed, they're also available on various different we have an aggressive social media presence, as well as like apartments.com and things like that they're listed. Unfortunately, we can't just stand in the lobby and say, and so 722 units that's a lot, right? And that it's a hill that I'm working to climb. I have been overseeing about a month, a little more than a month. And it's not just, in full transparency, it is not just the vacancy, it's the delinquency is very high as well. We have some issues that we have to overcome. I have put together aggressive plan for the staff and laid that out. We are reducing our rents. I am concessions. If we can get someone in the unit and give a little bit of rent for free, that's absolutely my plan. We are looking at making some drastic changes. Have been very transparent with them about this is the reality that they had gotten that information before, which is unfortunate. I've also put together this is our plan, these are the steps, and we are, we're working towards that. It didn't get here overnight. It's not going to get fixed overnight, but I do assure you that my background is in troubled asset workouts, and this is something that I've done before, and I think that I will be successful doing it again. I just need to change the culture in Beacon, and I also need to get buy-in that this is our goal. So that's where I'm at right now.
I mean, I look at this and I'm like, that's like 1,000 homes that somebody could be moving into within the next month, and so, I mean, we need to try to do what we can do to get people in those homes.
Oh, I agree. It's unacceptable. We're struggling with the San Antonio market. The market rate is about 84% occupancy because there is the volume of units that we've onlined. So there's things that are working against us, but at the end of the day, if we can beat out our competition with price, that's my strategy. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Counselor, if you'll move us into close.
Yes, sir. The board will now be convening in closed session to discuss personnel and consult with its attorney under sections 551.074 and 551.071 to discuss compensation review for the president and CEO and executive leadership team and also regarding the acting CEO duties, including 5 priorities. The board will also be consulting with its attorney under Section 551.071 regarding the adoption of a code of conduct for the Board of Commissioners. The time is 3:04.
Hello and welcome back to Opportunity Homes San Antonio's Operations and Real Estate Committee meeting. The time is 4 o'clock and the board has returned from closed session. Would you like me to conduct roll call? Okay, you may continue with the meeting.
We're going to go back to item 8, consideration and appropriate action regarding adopting a code of conduct for the Board of Commissioners. We will take a motion on what was discussed in closed session to move it to the full board meeting for approval.
I motion, oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I motion we move it to the board meeting.
Nice second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Move a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Yay. Thank you, Springview, for hosting us, by the way.
Yes,
Wherever,
wherever they are.
I know it's a lot of work.
yeah.
Real quick.
Goddamn worry this.